Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to Pop Culture Philosophers. I am Rockin Robbie Billups, and it is Friday. That means it's time for the Rex and the Robbie Show. But before I bring my homie Rex in to have the conversation that we're going to have today, which is a conversation that happens on social media every few months, we decided let's tackle it here because are there easy answers? Yeah, but it's kind of a nuanced and complex question of what is more important in comic books, the writing or the artwork? So that's what we're going to get what we are going to get into. However, I do want to plug the CBC Awards right now, the Comic Book Community Awards. Nominations are open. I threw a link in the chat right there. You can go and nominate your favorite comic book YouTubers in a myriad of categories, including Best Comic Book Review, of which we hope to be nominated for again so that we can defend our title. You can nominate favorite channels. You can nominate Best Spec Video, Best Unboxings, all that kind of stuff and more. And plus, there's a category for Best Hair, Hands, and or Beard. I would love to be nominated for Best Hair. Speaking of a former Best Hair winner, let's bring him in. It's Rex from Dynamite. How you doing, my man?
That was mean. That was just mean. Now, how do I not? I'm sorry. I'm very busy right now. I actually clicked on the link. I'm trying to nominate you, but where do I do that?
Well, you got to write in your nominations, so it's not a quick thing.
Man,
yeah,
that's a lot. That's a lot of work.
You can just go to the Best Hair category and nominate me. But I would also appreciate anybody who wants to nominate us for Best Channel, to nominate us for Best Collaboration, for the Best Comics of the Month stream. We're really proud of that. So there's lots of great YouTubers, too, that you can nominate as well.
Well, dude, I'll think about it. But now you're telling me I got to write it in. There's a lot of work involved here.
Yeah, well, all you got to do is write in. What's up, bud? Pop Culture Philosophers. That's all you got to do. Just copy paste Pop Culture Philosophers. That's what you got to do.
All right. Well, I thought I just had to click some buttons. That was the end of that, but apparently not.
Okay. I appreciate the almost support, Rex. Thank you.
I like your hair. It's not that much. I don't know what to tell you. You know.
Okay, it's fine. It's fine.
I like it enough to click a few buttons, but if I got to do all kinds of writing and stuff, I'm not sure.
We got Perry on every single one of his channels saying that art is the most important thing. Couchin' and Slouchin' says, art gets you in the door, writing keeps you in. Perry once again says, good art, bad writing, I still buy. Bad art, good writing, I pass on. And there's where you can nominate me for Best Hair. But anyway, we appreciate everybody being here.
You have to write them in, though. Just be prepared.
What's that?
It's not that simple. I said, I'm just warning people, you got to write them in. It's not that simple. You can't just click on a button. So...
Blood Splatter Chatter, our buddy Verno. I was on Blood Splatter Chatter last night. Check out the replay on that. We talked about the Brandon Cronenberg film, Possessor. We had a really great conversation about it. Verno's one of my favorite people. I love that dude. He says, both are important, but I can read a poorly written comic with great art, but not the other way around. Perry says, yeah, that's way too much work.
Well, yeah, I'm with you, Perry.
Anyway, so this is the question we're going to get into today. And I want you to kick us off, Rex, because you've been in this industry for a while, professionally and as a fan back in the day. And we all have our ideas. And like, obviously, it seems easy. The art's what leads people in, like somebody said in the chat before. But the story's what really kind of starts keeping us in, right? Like maybe you picked up X-Men because you like the John Byrne artwork. But what Chris Claremont was doing with the journeys of those characters kept people in that for decades, you know? So to you, and the other thing is, real quick. I think both are as equally as important, but we can talk about the different degrees of which and why. But I want to ask you, what's more important to you? What drives you? What drew you in? What keeps you in?
This may be a first. Mark the date down. What is it? June 9th, 2023 at 12:08 p.m. Rockin Robbie and I may finally completely agree. So I mark that down. All right, so I agree with you. I think that when you talk about comic books, you're talking about the art and the writing. One cannot exist without the other. So it's like, you know, asking a human being, would you prefer to breathe or have your heart continue beating? Well, how can you have one without the other? So what I mean by that is, look at it this way. Tremendous art with poor writing just makes it art. How is that any different than the Mona Lisa or whatever? You don't need a story. You don't need any writing. The art stands for itself. If you have great writing and let's say no art, then what do you got? You got a novel. So when you take one out or say one is more important to the other in comic books, I think that in a sense you're changing the nature of what it is by having that debate. Because a comic book depends on its art and its writing. Now, it's not to say that it's always equal, but in a very real sense, if you have art minus writing, you have a piece of art. If you have writing minus art, then you have a great piece of literature. So it becomes something completely different without the other. So the uniqueness of comics is that it is a combination of the two. Now, could a great artist carry a bad writer? Yeah, in some instances. And maybe in a sense, we prefer that. Can a good writer carry a bad artist? I believe that they can. Okay. Now, to the degree with which one will influence someone or another depends on that unique person. Okay. So nobody looks at it as a 50-50 split, but I think it's a pointless discussion in the sense that, well, how would you act if you were a crocodile? Well, I'm not a crocodile. I'm a warm-blooded mammal. So asking me how would I act is kind of a silly question. I don't know. I can't answer that question. That doesn't exist. My mind in a crocodile's body, that situation doesn't exist. It cannot exist. Because if you put my mind in a crocodile, am I a crocodile?
Okay.
So, you know what I'm saying? In a sense, it is an unanswerable question.
Yeah.
Those two mediums are forever mixed, thereby creating a new form of art/literature, which is comics.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, thank you, figure drawing. I like to be efficient. It's Friday. I'm a little tired. So, yeah. All right. Show's over. We've answered the question.
Well, it's not a pointless discussion. Now it comes up because, and I think one of the reasons.
No, let me say this. Of course it is, but that's what you and I specialize in on Fridays at noon.
That's true.
Pointless discussions. Okay.
Yes.
There could be nothing more pointless than discussing Ezra Miller. A little disappointed that there was very little action this week, so we had no topic.
Dude, they weren't kidding, man. Like Ezra is like quiet. They're just like they're not going to do anything. Anyway, so
sitting on him, dude.
Oh, you're cutting in and out, Rex. Here's the thing.
There.
You're cutting in and out, and you got delayed responses again, bro. Just so you know.
I'm cutting out, aren't I?
Yep. Yes, you are. Okay.
All right. If it happens again, we'll do the reboot thing again.
Okay. So this comes up because writers, especially writers that are, treat their job like a job, they can do like 5, 6, sometimes 8 books a month if they really get to it, right? Maybe to varying degrees of quality. An artist nowadays has trouble doing 1 book a month. And the reason why is because there is no doubt in my mind that the more strenuous task, the more complex task, and the hardest part of making a comic book is the artist. He has the toughest job. They have the toughest job. She has the toughest job. The reason why is because writing is a skill, and there's a big difference between somebody like Peter David and Neil Gaiman, right? There's a reason for that. Not saying Peter David's a bad writer, because he's a very solid, consistent writer. But Neil Gaiman's at another level. So there is really high-level talent as far as writing goes in comics. There's also a lot of really bad writing. There's also a lot of great art, top-tier stuff, and a lot of bad art. It takes so much more for an artist to develop their skill than a writer. A writer can turn in 5 scripts a month, continuously hone that craft. An artist has to learn figure drawing, has to learn perspective, has to map all of that out, has to learn so much about tools, about techniques. So I get that. This why this debate comes up, I think, is because people
all right, erase the date. You're gonna erase the date now.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm telling you, Rex, like I mean, writing a story, I'm not saying it's easy, but it is not easy to draw a really solid comic book, to illustrate something, to tell a story sequentially through images that looks cool, that pops, and clearly tells the story. Now,
you see, I'm gonna have to disagree with you completely.
well, what I'm
Because
saying is,
yeah,
listen, Rex, listen. What I'm saying is, this is why the argument
oh,
comes up.
step back here, man. Relax now, okay?
This is why the argument comes up, is because I think some artists sometimes start feeling like they're underappreciated for the task that they're doing. And a lot of people, like, writers are kind of the more like, it's writers can be rock stars in comics. Like, I have a plethora of favorite writers. Grant Morrison's one of my favorite writers. Their book, The Invisibles, is one of my absolute favorite comic books of all time. I don't like the art throughout all of The Invisibles. There are moments where it absolutely shines, and I think it's amazingly brilliant, but that is a concept-oriented book that I get into. So I can continuously be engaged in a comic, even if I don't necessarily think the art is the greatest, if the story, characters, and concepts are there for me. I used to say that writing was more important to me because ultimately, yeah, it's a visual medium. The art may draw you in, but you won't be stuck in unless you are engaged in a story, compelled by some characters. The more and more, though, that I learned about art, and the more I learn about artists and the craft of making comics, it is not an easy thing to do. Now, the best comics are written well, illustrated well, and it's the collaboration between the two. And even beyond that, I think some of the best comics are written and illustrated by the same person. Your Hellboy, your New Gods, things like that really stick out because then it's a clear, unified voice. When we're talking about Marvel and we're talking about DC, we have a lot of writers back in the day, especially, where they would give an artist like a paragraph. Hey, this happens, and then we're going to wind up here. Now the artist has to figure out how to take that and tell the story, break it down, pace it out. Now, a lot of writers go full script nowadays, so it's more of a screenplay approach, but it is that collaboration. I do believe that both are equally important, but I don't want anybody to be misled and think that writing is as difficult on the base comic book level. I'm not talking about the Alan Moore, Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman level. I'm talking about the average comic book writer. That job is nowhere near as hard as art. Now you can go. I'm sorry. I do a Robbie rant.
All right. So I'm going to have to, unfortunately, completely disagree with you. Well, not unfortunately. So we can erase the date. June 9th is no longer the date that Robbie and I agree completely. So I don't really think you're being fair, because I don't really think you're comparing apples to apples. All right. A lot of writers get stuck on a title that already has an ongoing storyline. So they don't really have the freedom to create something and an engaging storyline. So they have to stick within the storyline. That's quite a challenge, right? So I'm not saying an artist's job is easy, but I do believe that is something that's truly, you're given, it for some it may be difficult, for you, for me, for some it's not. And what do I mean by that? I've sat there and watched Ken Hazer. We tell him, we want a Punisher. He doesn't look anything up. He does it from memory. Okay, everything fits into the cover. It's all spatially correct. He just starts drawing.
You're cutting in and out again, Rex.
All right. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Well, let me ramble on a little bit. What I'm trying to say is this, man, and I get what Rex is saying. Like, when he watches Ken Hazer do those sketches and it seems so freaking easy, how long did it take Ken to get there? It took Ken years of training to get there. The art is what pulls us in first thing. And the story can keep us there. And very rarely do we get a long run of the same writer and the same artist. Hey, Rex is back. Let's see if it's better. How you doing, Rex?
I'm sorry about that, guys. I have requested a new laptop. I don't know if it's a laptop. I don't know if it's Comcast. I get on a Comcast rant for about a half an hour. It has become increasingly frustrating because it's happened almost every show that we've done. Then just sort of clears up. So anyway, the point I was trying to make is that if you look at writers and artists who have redefined the universe, okay? So let's look at Batman, okay? A character that's obviously been around a really long time, a lot of different writers. We saw a direction that kind of took the campy 50s, and then we saw what Neil Adams could do to it, and then we saw a whole redefinition of the character, okay? All right, written by Frank Miller, right? And it redefined the character in a way that even hit the movies, yeah? So that's the power of writing. Now, an artist, again, great artists make it look easy. So I'm not saying it's not hard, but I'm saying that, again, I think people undervalue, the writing and overvalue the art. And it's, again, not to disparage the art or the artist or, like I am a huge Alex Ross fan, okay? Not in any way disparaging that. I have no idea how he makes all of his art look so incredibly lifelike. I have no idea how that's done. Okay, so I stand in awe of that as well. But I stand in awe of the writers. When you look at why does it stick? You've had multiple writers write a particular title. Multiple artists draw a particular title. Yet, why is it that character and that title continue to go on and on and on? Because the original person, the original writer that came up with that concept built a perpetuating universe so that other writers could link onto the original idea. But none of this happens without the idea. If you look at the way comics are made, nobody draws a superhero and says, all right, so let's make a story about this, okay? The art is created after the concept is created. Well, we want a superhero that does this and shoots this out of his eyes and whatever. And with this kind of backstory. All right, what do we make him look like? Or she look like? So at the end of the day, the concept is what's most important. And what I'm trying to say, I guess another way of saying it is the art and the writing all come from that concept, but the concept has to come first. And I'm saying that the concept is a written kind of thing. Right?
Okay.
So you got to write it down. Okay, now we have an idea. OUG, I know that. But look, I like Frank Miller's unique art. But who here really thinks that Frank Miller is known for his art or for his writing?
I think he's known for his art, 100%, bro. Daredevil, Sin City, Dark Knight Returns.
Again, all of that is storyline that, Dark Knight Returns redefined the character, gave us something completely different.
You don't think the art had anything to do with that? Like his 16, you don't think the art had anything to do with Dark Knight Returns?
I'm not saying I'm saying the magic of that was partly the art. But you're saying that, everybody's leaning towards it's the art. There is no art without the writing. There is no concept without the writing. Okay? Frank Miller, do you think he started drawing first, or he said, you know what, let me redefine Batman as everyone knows him? Something completely different. A totally different character, but based on this historic character.
Well, see, Frank Miller's a good example of why both are so important together. Because Frank Miller's one of the reasons why I think he's such a great writer for comics is because he is an artist. And he understands.
I agree with that.
Now, friend of the show, Nick Patara, was on, and he said that he heard a quote somewhere, and he lives by this now, and it gave him kind of the courage to go off and do his own thing, where he said, every comic book writer is a failed comic book artist. And that's kind of true. A lot of comic book writers that wanted to be an artist. Not everybody can be a Frank Miller, or to a lesser degree, not everybody can be a Dan Jurgens and write a compelling story and lay it down and break it down and tell it visually as well. Alan Moore Grant Morrison, Neil Gaiman. These are writers who are also artists, who understand this stuff, right? There's a lot of writers, I believe, that just feel like they're writing screenplays and they're not giving their artists enough information,
All
or
right,
they're giving it too much.
let me put it another way, then, okay? Because I kind of don't like that statement that every writer is a failed artist. Okay, so art is very subjective. Okay, I'm not a fan of Picasso, but apparently a lot of people are. Okay, so again, I want to say that when you are an artist and a writer, it gives you an advantage. That's for sure, because you're writing the story, so you envision it in your own mind. So if you are also an artist, it's much easier for you to put that story down as art and translate, because really it's the idea that's central. The writing and the art are merely vehicles with which to express the story that is in your head. So clearly someone who is writing and drawing has an enormous advantage because it's all in one head. But if you have a writer on the book and you have an artist on the book, then you still have the unfortunate, cumbersome kind of nature of humans communicating with each other. You think we're talking about the same idea, but maybe in actuality, we're not. So it is a tougher job when you do it that way. That I agree with. So someone like Dan Jurgens obviously has an advantage. He envisions the idea. He's the artist. He's the writer. Even when he's teamed up with somebody, as an artist, he's able to talk maybe more in the artist's language to express what he's trying to write. So, no, figure drawing, never. I've seen all of Picasso's work. I'm not a fan. It is what it is. I'm not making a judgment on Picasso as an artist. He is obviously well respected. His originals are ridiculous amount of money, more than I could afford ever. But I'm not a fan. So there is a subjective nature to that. So again, I see the point you're trying to make, but again, it's subjective. And the other part is not all, but it is the threshold to become an artist is a big one. Okay. And you see the talent right away. Like, I'm sure Ken Hazer did not spend a lot of time figuring out, oh, wow, I can really draw stuff. As he's comparing what he's drawing as a kid to like his classmate next to him, like, yo, dude, your stick figure don't even look like a stick. Okay. So from that perspective, I think that talent. So there is a big jump. So a lot of us don't become artists because, as a kid, we're coloring the books, and we can't color in the line. The other kids like, drawing Alex Ross level stuff. Like, damn, he's really got talent. I don't. But writing, it's a little more subtle to discover that, because we can all write, we can all read. So it takes a little bit more to figure out, no, I don't have the talent. Yes, I do have the talent. So maybe the writing feels a little bit more crowded from that perspective. But again, I think that both are just a vehicle with which to express an idea. Okay. And the uniqueness of comics is that it takes art and writing to express an idea. Whereas a painting is just a painting trying to express an idea. And you see people standing in an art museum, like this, and it has a different meaning to everybody, and that's okay. Then you get a great novel, a great writer. Sci-fi is my favorite, so I look at a Isaac Asimov and Frank Herbert. Very different writers, and their universes were very different. Okay, if you look at Dune and you look at Foundation, but both of them brilliant writers. And I didn't know that right away. I'll tell you, the first time I read Dune, first 100 pages, I'm like, man, this is like dragging. But then after the first 100 pages, he hooked me. And I couldn't get enough. Even after the man passed away, I'm buying his son, and he was, I want to say Sanderson, but he was hooked up with another writer, and they were trying to continue the universe. And his father created such a universe that I read it. Was it as good? Not even close. But it filled a vacuum when his father passed away, and you knew there were no more Dune books coming out. His father had a gift, and that gift was so incredible that I took a pale comparison and read it just for the need of more of this universe. Asimov, same thing. And then he had some other sci-fi writers continuing on after he passed. They were so bad. At least Herbert's son was okay, but it was brutally bad. So I stopped reading them. It wasn't that style. It wasn't that technique. You could just tell. Okay. So that's why I look at it from both angles, and why the comic universe is so unique, because it blends the two to tell the story, to express the idea.
You're right. Right. And a lot of these artists or writers we've been talking about are artists as well. And I think that, and I love comic books so much. And I think that there are a bigger percentage of comic book writers who don't understand the medium than there are artists. Now, I think that there are artists who don't understand the medium too. It's not just about drawing pretty pictures. It's just not about making nice figures. It's not just about showing movement and stuff like that. It's about telling a story, breaking it down, keeping a reader engaged visually, telling a story in a nice, non-cluttered space, making it feel free and loose, but at the same time, bringing any kind of atmosphere or tone. A lot of techniques, a lot of different ways to go about it. I think there are so many writers who are just writing comics as if they're just writing like television scripts with no idea of how this is supposed to be told in a comic. They don't understand that art form. That's why I think a writer who is an artist, maybe not the best artist, but a writer who is familiar with art and how to break down and sequentially tell a story in an innovative and interesting way, is as important as an artist who can do it fully, even if they can't, for instance, write dialogue.
I'll give you another example. All right. So the art has to be good. Okay. I mean, or it has to be decent. All right. Nobody's hiring me to draw panels. We know that. So it has to be good. So there's the writing. Okay, it has to be engaging. But I think the writer has a bigger challenge if they're continuing on in a title. A story within story. That's tough. You gotta come up with storyline, but here are the parameters that you're restricted in. All right. So now I've got to take all of these touch points that are established. Okay. Whatever title I'm writing, whether it be Star Trek or whatever. Okay. I have to fit my universe within that. So there are a lot of these parameters. I have to tell an engaging story within all these parameters. That's not easy. Okay. Not saying that it's easier for the artist, but the artists, if they're good artists, can make, even if the storyline isn't great, they can make that part of the story look phenomenal because they are a talented artist. So from that perspective, I think, everybody thinks that the artist has a harder job. I'm not saying they have an easy job, but I'm saying the writer's job is tougher than you think. Okay. Again, I'm not disagreeing with that point, KG. The art, but you say the art is more important. Well, if you just have no dialogue balloons, just pages of art that tell the story. Okay. Is that an effective way of telling the story?
Yes, why not? Jim Steranko did it. Jim Steranko did it in S.H.I.E.L.D. Larry Hama did it in G.I. Joe. Those are very memorable issues in comics. You know what I'm saying? Like,
sure they are.
Well, so like for instance, so many comics, man, Rex, so many mainstream comics, for instance, have so much just word vomit on the page because I feel like it's the writer trying to compensate. When I met Frank Miller, one of the things he said that he learned, one of the things that Andy Kubert said that he learned from Frank Miller was leave plenty of space for the writer because they'll fill it with all their insecurities because they can't draw a comic, right? I think it starts with the art. I think that this is a visual medium. It is something that we want to look at and appeal. My favorite creators are both Daniel Clowes, Frank Miller. These are people that understand Katsuhiro Otomo, Mobius. These are people who can have brilliant artwork, but also tell really good stories. Now, not every artist is a great writer, and not every writer is a great artist, but in comics, you got to have a blend of the two. And art is what captures our attention. The story.
We've already agreed about that. Okay, yeah. That it is a synergy of the two forms that make comics. And 62 Lefty, hey, what's going on, buddy? I already said that earlier in the show. Without art, you have a novel, but without the writing, you have a piece of art. Okay, so So I would think that if we went that way, and I'm not saying those issues were not memorable, of course they were. They were a completely different thing, okay? And it was done very well. But why isn't it just commonplace then? Because it would be so difficult to tell the story through pure art alone.
I sorely disagree. In fact, I believe that a great comic, you can ignore all the fucking words and get the gist of the story.
Then you might as well go back to silent films, where you need dialogue for, right?
But they had dialogue in silent films. Just was not.
My problem with the argument is I'm not diminishing the art at all. But what I think is what you guys are trying to do is you're trying to artificially separate the two and say one's more important than the other. Okay. And I'm saying, how does one exist without the other? So the entire premise of the conversation is flawed. One cannot exist without the other. Without the other, they become something totally different. That's the point I'm trying to stress is everybody, and I kind of feel this way, so I'll be the lone voice, okay, is that everybody's diminishing the role of the writer, and they're more critical of the writer. Okay, I don't think that's fair. And I think that under certain conditions, they don't. Yes, I believe 62 Lefty. Exactly. That's the point I'm trying to make. It is a symbiotic relationship. You cannot have one without the other. And to say one is more important than the other is a disservice to whomever you think is less important. Okay. People say that, oh, I buy for the art. I buy for the art. I'm sure that you do. So now we just have a book of art. Will you still be buying it, and for how long? And will you miss the dialogue, the storyline, the words? I don't know.
All right. I want to address Carrie in the chat, OUG. I'm not saying that you have to be a good artist, but you do need to understand like how you would break down that page. You know, you need to understand how that story is going to flow from page to page and where your page turns are going to be. And yeah, you do kind of have to be a little bit of an artist. You got to put that in your head because you're not writing scripts. You're not writing novels. You are writing something that's going to be told visually through art. And I'm not saying that you have to be an artist to do that, but you do need to understand comic book art more because there are plenty of times where I read a comic and I can tell this writer has no idea what comics are. Like when Marvel does this all the time.
Whose fault is that?
Bring in somebody from
wait, Robbie.
Hold on a second. They'll bring in someone from Hollywood, like J.J. Abrams' son or something like that. And I read that book and I'm like, he doesn't know how to write a comic. Like it's that simple. And an artist isn't going to necessarily help elevate you if it's just a paycheck, if it's just a job, if it's not a truly collaborative effort. You know, if it's not, we're not talking about like Alan Moore's Swamp Thing where like you have beautiful, luscious artwork and amazing, deep and rich writing, right? And Carrie, I'm not trying to dissuade you. I applaud you in your efforts to be a writer, but you should learn a little bit about art, comic book art in particular, and why it's effective in certain ways. It's just something you need to know. It's part of your tools. It's part of your
J.J. Abrams' son, not a good example. Okay, because we all know why. Because the publisher is trying to capitalize on the name, right? So that's why they bring him in. Okay, they don't think he's going to turn into a Frank Miller kind of writer or anything like that. Okay, but he has the Abrams last name. We'll sell books. Okay, so and a lot of these writers that you say come from Hollywood that are writing scripts and not storylines, whose fault is that? Okay, I don't blame the writers. It's so hard to make a living doing that, as the recent writer's strike that demonstrates. So these guys are trying to pay the bills. So you got to, I'll write anything, man. I'm just trying to pay the mortgage at the end of the month. So what you got? Okay. So I don't put that on writers being out of their comfort zone. I realize they're trying to eat. Artists, same thing. Okay. That's a whole nother discussion. How publishers, overall treat IP and work for hire and things like that. Okay. Because starving artists, same as starving writers. But again, 62, I agree. I'd say that a writer / artist has an advantage because it's the same brain. You don't have to translate that information to somebody else. That's when the breakdowns always happen, don't they? when you try to express an idea to somebody else and they say, oh, I got it, and they don't got it, they're seeing something totally different. So if the talent of writing and art is in the same brain, it's going to make it easier. And they can describe, if I'm a writer who also has done art, if I'm not doing the art for this book, I can explain to the artist, okay, as an artist, look, here it is. Just like it's much easier for a mechanic to explain to another mechanic on a different car, say, like, look, yeah, usually it's here, but it's here, okay, on this model, than somebody who doesn't know anything about cars, right? So wait, what's an oil filter? You see my point. So again, I can't. It's what made Claremont and Byrne, what they did in that run, so magical, right? Because it was art and writing, and it all came together, and it worked from two separate people. So that makes what they did during that period so incredibly unique. It's not easy to do. Now you have lower level writers with, let's call them lower level artists, being thrown on titles. Why? Because they need to work. Not everybody gets to recreate a universe like a Frank Miller or say an Alex Ross or even a Dan Jurgens, right? They don't have the muscle. I'm just trying to make a living at what I love doing. And again, I go back, is that I'm not saying the art is not important. I'm just saying that everybody feels like the art is the most important, but it's the easiest, most visual thing to make a judgment on. Whereas the writing, it's going to take you a little bit before you say, oh my God, this story art sucks. You might find in one issue, you might be like, yeah, I don't like this so much, but I'll give it 2-3 more issues. And it takes that long for you to really decide, oh my God, this storyline, this is just awful. It's brutal. Whereas with art, you're going to know probably by the time you turn the first couple of pages, this art sucks. Or this art is great. It didn't take me a whole lot of having to review Alex Ross's artwork before I decided, oh my God, this is like phenomenal. It's like something I've never seen before. All I'd see was one, Superman. Wow. Okay. It took 2-3 books before I figured out that Isaac Asimov or Frank Herbert were just brilliant writers.
Okay.
It took a while to form that picture. I think art at its one extreme, you look at it and it fills you with a kind of emotion, right? Thank you, Perry. And with writing, it's something that you read that also strikes an emotional chord. And comics uniquely brings that two mediums together. And I think that one is just as important as the other. And people saying, and like you're saying, well, you could have just, comic art telling the story without any dialogue. Okay. How do you express any emotion? How do you have any thought?
It got brought up in the chat earlier, but there's a Rick Remender book, and I can't remember the name of the artist right now, called Step by Bloody Step. Completely no dialogue and a very emotional story. Like it can be done, Rex. I'm
not saying it can't be done. Can it be done consistently? Okay. And what does it do to the medium? Say everybody is trying to diminish the point of the writer. So I ask you this, all right? As Chat GPT is starting to make its way into the world, okay, and writing stuff. And now I'm starting to see articles like, stuff it's writing is nonsensical. When you get down to it, it's not good. It's this, that. I'm not saying that AI won't get better. But AI right now can draw anything, can make any image of anything. So what does that say? What does that do to the artist? And I'm not agreeing with that, okay? But that kind of technical sort of talent can be easily produced. But we're finding that writing is a little bit more difficult.
I'm not saying that writing comics is easy. I think a lot of people get away with doing it easy and taking shortcuts and just kind of telling the same stories over and over and over again. Let me go back real quick. Image Comics, when that happened, what did we prove to the industry then? That these artists were the superstars, right? And that they could. Now I know that the bubble burst, the spec bubble, that didn't have anything to do with the quality of the books, but like people followed those creators and they followed those artists. And today, Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, they're still rock stars.
What did you just say there?
What's that?
What did you just say there?
That the artists were very important and sold millions of copies.
Creators. That was the first word that came out of your mouth. Okay. The creators. Yeah. And we followed them. And I agree with you. So.
Okay.
See, again.
There's that. Okay. But here,
again, there's that link, isn't there? You can't just. What did we find out about Liefeld? Okay. We knew he was in Disneyland living large. Right? We followed it. We liked Youngbloods, and then we watched it, and then there was delay after delay after delay for issue after issue after issue. We knew at that stage, the art was getting lazy. Full page, double page splashes with no feet that didn't really say anything. Okay. The writing had fallen down to a minimal. Okay. Very, very few word balloons. And we started to go, this is crap. Okay. Spawn obviously turned into a movie. Okay. Todd McFarlane, he paid attention. He didn't go to Disney World for a year and live in large. But again, in Liefeld's defense, he was a kid. He got vaulted into superstardom as a kid, for God's sake.
Yeah. All those checks got cashed though, didn't they?
Yeah. But I don't blame him for that. I'm a kid. I'm living large. All this money's flowing in. I'm going to live in Disneyland for a year. God bless you if you can do it. But we saw what happened with that. And he kind of lost momentum there. Jim Lee didn't. Nose to the grindstone to where he is today. McFarlane didn't. Realizing that people can be fickle and you never know. So he started doing stuff like buying out starting lineup and revamping that. Todd McFarlane has got to be one of the smartest businessmen out there.
Yeah.
All right. Dan Jurgens, I know, was very smart during the heyday of Death of Superman. Okay. And he was a very smart business. I believe he was a minority owner of the Minnesota Vikings at one point. So again, what I'm saying is that, yes, that was a unique time, but we followed them because they were creators and we love their art. We love the storyline. See, again, it always goes back to the same thing. You guys are trying to separate something that you cannot separate. The medium exists because of the two things. That's the point I'm trying to make. And I'm not saying
I agree with that, Rex. Like it's the best comics have both. I'm just saying that I think the artists have the harder job. That's just me personally. That's what I think. Unless you're a really good writer. And we're talking about there are so many people that we could put up there and go, Neil Adams, Alex Ross, Frank Miller, John Byrne, Ryan Otley, Ryan Stegman, Nick Pitara, Nick Dragata, all these great artists, right? Sergio Aragones, Mike Mignola, we keep going, right? But who are the greatest writers in comics that really make you proud to be in the comic book industry? Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, Grant Morrison.
Let me ask you another question.
You start running thin, man.
Let me pose it another way to you. Okay. Invariably, people criticize the writing more than they criticize the art. Okay. If you don't like a title or you don't like a series, what's the first thing you talk about? Okay. Sometimes the art's crappy. Okay. But the art is very, very easily reviewed by editors and whatever. And early on, this artist, okay. So we see a lot of sketch covers. And Ken Hazer, top of the list, so fast, so talented. Okay. And then we've had a few who shall remain nameless. And you're looking at this did a 5-year-old draw this? It's horrible. So it's something you can immediately judge. So as an editor, you people submit stuff. You're like, no, this guy's awful. We're not hiring him. Okay. So it's really, it's much easier to decide. But as an editor or whatever, or powers that be, when you're evaluating writers, you're going to read a whole bunch of stuff this guy's written before you make a decision. You're going to read a few things, of which probably the resume will be included. But you're not doing that deep dive because you can't get an immediate reaction. You're going to have to actually put some work to see if this writer's any good. So that's going to take time. Everybody's got limited time. So you're going to look at that resume and go, who'd you write for? What'd you write? And you're going to make a decision in a more, I don't want to say superficial, but in a more superficial way. Whereas an artist is very quick. So invariably, when people complain, they complain about the storyline, the story arc, the writing. This is stupid. Why they do this? Okay. When I'm talking to our buddy AR, I mean, that's his complaints. That and the flimsy paper. Okay. Yeah. So if art is exceptional, we'll point that out. You know, like, wow, the art was phenomenal.
I like Figure Drawing's comment.
That's
all right.
true.
Let me ask you another question. Let me take you back to a different decade. We went back to the 90s with the Image thing. Let's go back to the early 60s. What do you think was more important to the success of Marvel Comics, Stan Lee or Jack Kirby?
Again, I'm going to call that a synergy. Okay. And the reason is because it was Jack Kirby's creations. Okay. That had stood the test of time to this day. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But Stan Lee was the promoter. He knew how to get it out there, because no matter how great that art and storyline is, if people don't know about it, you know, how's it going to get anywhere? You know, it's unfortunate that, you know, look at, you know, actual fine art. It's a shame that you know, art dealers and you know, and art houses have to promote the artists. Otherwise they don't get anywhere. So in a sense, I kind of feel like it's that kind of relationship that they sort of had. You know, Kirby's creation, yeah, Dynamite. I kind of like that. Stan's vision, Kirby's talent. I kind of like that description of it, because without Stan, you're not somebody knocking on doors, getting it out there. Okay, you know, in the you know, on the way, making himself a kind of a personality. Cameos in every single MCU movie, but he sold it, man. Without him selling it, he became the face of Marvel Comics. But Jack Kirby, it's his creations that have stood that test of time. Obviously, he created something kind of like the Frank Herbert example I gave. So, again, does Kirby's characters become what they become without Stan? Can Stan really sell Marvel to what it eventually became without Kirby's ideas?
Yeah.
So I kind of look at that. And unfortunately, it's the same way I look at the writer-artist question, in a sense. It's almost the same question, just kind of in a different way.
Yeah.
So, you know, no matter what, even when Marvel was having tough times, you knew about them. You knew it was Stan Lee. Okay. When you look at DC and its infinite number of CEOs, okay. Last one I remember that was editor-in-chief was Carmine Infantino, and then Jim Lee, of course, you know, chief creative officer for so many years. Okay, now I know his role has changed now, but
yeah.
But other than that, I couldn't point to another one. But Marvel, Stan Lee, Roy Thomas. I mean, you know, there was, I give that to Stan. He made sure you knew who they were.
Okay. Well, it seems like in conclusion, we do agree on the fact that both art and writing are equally important for comics. But what we're disagreeing with is which is more difficult to do, I guess. So, and that's fine. And that's cool. And this has been a cool conversation that is nowhere near done. I'm sure we'll be talking about this again, because
this is an unsettled conversation. Everybody's going to have their own opinion on it, and they're entitled to their own opinion.
Yeah.
But, you know, I kind of look at it as just, it is what it is because of the two components. And as soon as you try to separate one or try to say one is better than the other, you know, I don't think it makes any sense to say that, because to separate the two means you've changed what it is and it's no longer about comics. You know, you can't take one or the other out. Combined is why they make the unique medium that they make, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I'm sure that we'll continue this conversation Monday night on The Experience. Speaking about The Experience, why don't you tell us what's coming up, Rex?
All right. So tonight we've got Nick on The Experience at 7 p.m. Eastern time with some great original art. You don't want to miss it. It's got.
Hey, does he do a show where he sells scripts, like original scripts, or does he just sell original art?
I'll tell you.
That's a joke.
We've sold scripts in the past. I remember when not here, but the company I was working for, Star Trek Next Generation, that was actually a memorabilia item. Was the actual script of the movie. I actually read the script before I saw the movie. Again, the words printed on a piece of paper, the words together have value. Whether you reproduce them on a piece of paper doesn't really matter. Okay, art is different. Obviously, it's a visual medium. So
I was just joshing you, man.
I know you were. And then Monday we'll be back. Hopefully John's back. Who knows? All right, he was supposed to fly on Wednesday, but I told you about all the bad weather. Well, not bad weather, but the air quality here has been awful. So hopefully he'll be back on Monday. 6 p.m. Eastern will be me, John, and Robbie, of course, for our normal Monday show at 6 p.m. Eastern on The Experience. And what do you got going on?
Well, tomorrow night on Dylan's Horror Show, they're going to be talking about a movie called Street Trash. And I'm sure that's going to be a real fun conversation. You can check out my movie review with Verno over at Blood Splatter Chatter from last night. We talked about Brandon Cronenberg's Possessor, which is a really cool movie. Monday night, it's Crew's choice. It's John's pick. He picked an anime movie called A Silent Voice. So I'm excited to check that out. And Rockin Robbie Live will be going on Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Central Time. And I'm sure I'll be talking a little bit more about this subject as well. So that's what I got coming up. So heck yeah. Rex, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a fun conversation. I love having these debates with you and sometimes near arguments, and I cannot wait to continue to do more of this with you on Monday over at The Experience. So thank you for.
Hopefully Ezra does something. It's premiere week. So.
Oh man, it is premiere week. We're all watching them, right? So heck yeah. Join us over at The Experience. There's a link to the exact show that's already been set up. It's in the description below. I'm Rockin' Robbie. That's Rex. We're dipping out.